Hello and welcome, Star People. This is APM, your intrepid star guide and cosmic detective, and this is the Outlaw Astrology Podcast. We are in episode 164, hurrah, and this is where we dismantle the inherited hierarchy of aspects and build a more modern relationship and context-sensitive astrology that refuses to call any configuration inherently good or bad. And so, here's the focus today. When good aspects go wrong. So, we're examining real chart. We're examining examples here, where there are too many trines, too many sextiles that can lead to a stagnation, to entitlement, to a lack of resilience, or an inability to metabolize difficulty. And so, this is where we stop romanticizing ease and comfort and convenience and start asking what growth actually requires of us. And so, here's what we've done so far. Episode 162 questioned whether trines were actually gifts. Episode 163 explored sextiles as invitations requiring engagement. And now we're looking at the lived consequences when a chart is too harmonious, too comfortable, and too fluent without friction. Okay? And so, housekeeping. We are on, Outlaw Astrology is on YouTube. It is on Pinterest and on Instagram. You'll find those links in the show notes. There is a free and paid version of the Outlaw Astrologies, the Daily Stargazer newsletter, and there is an archive of over 500 posts, including 80 podcast episodes. So there is really a lot of content there for the having at a low price currently. I'd get in before I raise the price because I am going to raise the price at some point in the near future. Also, if you like what you're hearing, please share a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts because it helps people find me. And if you like what you hear in this episode, please feel free to download and share it so other people can enjoy it as well and learn. And with that said, onward. So this is basically here's what's going on. This work is for those who want to question astrology's inherited moralism and build a practice rooted more in nuance, in complexity, and lived experience rather than cookbook platitudes. Alrighty, and now onward. So, we're going to talk about the over-trine chart. And this is when fluidity becomes fragility. And so, here's the pattern. Charts with multiple grand trines or an abundance of trines across personal plans. So, traditionally, these read as blessed, fated, gifted. Yet what happens when life inevitably brings difficulty? So, let's introduce the shadow. Where everything, let's talk about that. So every trines have a shadow, just like everything. Okay? Sextiles have a shadow. Squares have a shadow. Everything that you think is good has a shadow. So let's talk about that. When everything comes easily, there's no reason to develop resilience, to develop a strategy, to develop skill or strength, to tolerate discomfort. So trines in a chart can be problematic because they do not provide us with opportunities to grow. Because if you have all of the ease, when you're happy, say you're sitting around with your favorite people, eating your favorite meal, watch with your favorite telly on and your favorite film or telly on in the background, you're having the best experience, are you motivated at all to make a change? No, you're having a good time. Why would you want that to change? You only want things to change when things are terribly uncomfortable or you're miserable and you're like, F this shit, I want out. That's when you start questioning. That's when you start challenging, and that's when growth is more likely to happen. Okay? So, the idea that we can have an easy life with growth is just not likely. Not bloody likely at all. So, let me look here. Oh dear. I do have a chart like that. Anyway. So I want to make certain I've got everything properly queued up just in case. So, overtrine charts can lack the musculature that only a friction can build. Friction being a square, an opposition, a quincunx, things like that. providing discomfort. So here's an example. A client with a grand fire trine, that's Sun, Jupiter, Mars. And let's say Sun in Sag, Jupiter in Leo, Jupiter in Aries, Mars in Leo. And this person has struggled with follow-through and entitlement and an inability to handle rejection. So they've got all the natural confidence, they've got all the enthusiasm, they're uplifting and optimistic, but they don't have enough discipline to back that up. So they might have all the talent, inherent talent, natural talent. You hear people talk about that a lot. Our current society seems to be in love with the idea that people just woke up one day and just started being amazing, and that was it. An example of such story like this would be Mozart. You will often hear that Mozart was brilliant and just sat down at a piano and just started tinkling the iris immediately. He was amazing straight out the gate. He had no practice, didn't have to do any work, and that is a common narrative in Western thinking. The kind of talent that he has would never have thrived without the patience and the discipline to refine it. And that is what's missing from the story. So what you have is all of this gorgeousness, all of this amazingness. We've got Mozart just killing it with all the beautiful music, all the wonderment, all of that, and nobody's questioning and nobody's saying, well, wait a second, is that even a likelihood? Is it likely that Mozart didn't have to work hard for anything, that he could just do what he wanted to do, that he could succeed without any challenges? And by the way, Mozart has a lot of squares in his charts, and the two most prominent after a square in his chart is sextile and a trine, are the two most common aspects after that. Now, here's what you need to know, even though this is not a square chart, we're mostly talking about sextiles and trines. The thing about sextile, as I've said previously, you have to activate it consciously. Trines are support, but they can be complacency. Okay? And he's got mostly squares, which means he had a lot of friction that made it necessary for him to have to learn. You know, what do I need to do? What do I need to change? And by the way, oh wow, okay, well, let's go drag one out in a bit. So all of that ability. Now, by the way, Mozart came from a family that was filled to the brim with musicians. His sister was a musician. His father was a musician. So, of course, it stood to reason, given the time period and given his social status, he too would become a composer and a musician himself. But that beautiful music would have stayed inside him without the proper abilities and the patience and discipline to refine it. And so here's what's missing. Trines can create an internal agreement. The planets speak the same language. They share the same element. There's no need to translate a thing. Yet, where is the challenge? Where is this tension that asks you to grow beyond what already feels natural? So, let's question that. Let's ask an uncomfortable question. Why does astrology valorize ease? Who benefits from the narrative that harmony is always desirable? What if some of us need difficulty to become who we are or who we are meant to be? So here's the key insight I want you to take away from this particular section. Fluency without struggle can breed complacency. A trine gives you the language you already speak, but it doesn't teach you new dialects or new ways of being or new ways of thinking even. Or new capacities that can be forged through necessity. It doesn't do any of that. It's just, oh, this feels really nice, and I'll have another cup of tea, and isn't this lovely? Now, let's talk about a sextile. This is when an opportunity can become overwhelmed. So here's the pattern. Charts loaded with sextiles, especially in air and fire or earth and water, are often interpreted as full of potential. So many talents, you can do anything. But what if that's paralyzing rather than empowering? So let's talk about the shadow side of this. And here's the shadow side of this. Sextiles require activation. They require choice. They require engagement. But when you have too many, you face decision fatigue or analysis paralysis. You've got scattered energy. You've got chronic underachievement because every option feels equally available and none feel urgent. Because remember, sextiles are not urgent. They're gentle prods. They're nudges. Urgency, you need squares for that. You need squares for that. And so here's an example. A client with Venus sextile Mars, Mercury sextile Jupiter, Moon sextile Neptune, and is creatively gifted, socially adept, and intellectually curious. Yet they are chronically unable to commit to a single thing, have mostly never finished any major projects is what I meant to say, and they have a hard time choosing one path over another because everything looks delicious, everything is possible, everything is urgent, everything feels like I need to have that now. Like I said, very Seven of Cups type of energy. There's an abundance of ease, and it becomes a prison of possibility. So let's explore further. Sextiles whisper that you could, but they don't demand that you must. So without a square, without oppositions, creating internal pressure, there's no internal urgency to actually act. The invitation remains perpetually open, perpetually unopened, perpetually unanswered, and etc. Let me see if I can find a sextile in Mozart's chart. So Mozart has a sextile from his MC, his midheaven, which is at 8 degrees of Gemini in his 10th house. And he has Neptune in, I have to see it, 9 degrees of Leo. So you'll see that's air and fire. So we got this very thinky, very curious point in Gemini and everywhere. And we've got that Neptune that brings a transcendent beauty. By the way, it's in the 12th house, the house of its own domicile, so rather comfortable. The kind of hidden things. So this is an opportunity. What is communication through beauty? Communication through music. And this could have just sat dormant in his chart, quite frankly, were it not for those squares, and he's got quite a few. We'll go into that another time, but right now, that right there, he's got the MC in air and Neptune in fire. That means MC in Gemini, Neptune in Leo, to the wanting to be seen and heard, to put beauty out there, to play, to create. But in the 12th house, all the symbols, all of the connection to the collective unconscious, meaning the archetypes. And so, here's the story that I think of most. He took a nursery rhyme and put it into a song, and it created a classical piece off of it. You can go look this up. And that is taking what you know, taking a nursery rhyme that you heard as a child and turning it into something transcendently beautiful. Now, like I said, this is an invitation. It didn't have to be woken up. It could have just stayed asleep. And that is the nature of a sextile, okay? And so, let me give you some cultural context. Late stage capitalism loves a sextile. Here's why. It promises an endless self-improvement quest, infinite potential, the fantasy that you can have it all. But if you have too many options, that's kind of more cruelty disguised as freedom. Because you're free to choose, but you have so many choices that all those choices become cruel rather than kind or free. You know, freedom is beautiful when it's bounded by fences, when it has boundaries. Freedom is beautiful with boundaries, but when it's unfettered freedom with no boundaries, we've seen how ugly that can get, haven't we? So, sextiles promise endless self-improvement. Who benefits when we all believe that we have to endlessly self-improve? Who benefits from the idea of selling us on infinite potential? Who benefits when the fantasy is that you can have it all? God love me, I'd love to have it all. I want that for myself. As a matter of fact, if I could have it all and I could have a magic wand and magic powers, I most certainly would change this universe to be one that runs on magic, so that I could be a wizard or a witch or a sorcerer, and also have that wonderful Star Trek technology, because I really want that. I want ease, I want tech, but I also want magic. And I would also probably be a wizard, but I'd also write and teach and do all kinds of stuff, and I'd probably live about 1,200 years, so I'd have all the time to do all the things, to chase down every sextile, everything that's in my chart, and you see how that sounds. Does that not sound highly impossible? And that is where the paralysis comes in, and that is where the potential can get strangled. There is a beautiful tree that grows in the United States South. It's called kudzu, and it's gorgeous. That's why most people don't cut it, because it's very lovely, but it's highly parasitic. It will grow over other trees, other shrubs, other plants, entire structures, houses even, and strangle the life out of other plants in its desire to survive. Okay? That's like sextile potential, energy potential. All that beauty, and you might see it as a Venus-Neptune sextile. All that beautiful, transcendent beauty, and all it does is strangle the life out of things. So, here's the thing to remember. Opportunity without necessity breeds paralysis. That is the message of the Seven of Cups, as I understand it. The sextile can offer the door. It offers the door, but it doesn't push you through. It doesn't even open the door for you. It just says, there's a door, and it's unlocked. The door is open, meaning unlocked. You can go through, but you still got to put your hand on the door. You still got to turn the knob. You still got to push it open and bloody well walk through. So a chart with too many doors, and you can spend a lifetime standing in the corridor or standing at the threshold of the door, meaning in the doorway, staring at the room and never walking through. Okay? And that is a thing that doesn't often get mentioned in astrology these days and in the self-help industry these days. It's all potential. Oh, you could do so many things. You could have it all, blah, blah, blah. Can you? But can you? That's the question. That's the question. Now, here is a challenge. And the challenge for sextiles and trines, a chart heavy with them, is this. There is a resilience deficit. And harmonious charts have a challenge with metabolizing things. So here's the pattern. People with predominantly harmonious charts, few or no squares, oppositions, quincunxes, often report struggling with criticism, with failure, with conflict, with every situation requiring sustained effort without immediate reward. There's some people who really can't get off their bum unless a reward is being offered. And if there's no reward, even if it's in their best interest, they're not going to get up and move. That's just the thing of it. And here's the thing. Resilience is a muscle. Psychological resilience, emotional resilience, physical resilience is regulation under stress, the ability to tolerate ambiguity, discomfort, and these can be skills built through friction, not ease. So most of the time you're going to learn to be resilient because you've had hard knocks. That's very Saturnine energy. And square energy, squares are actually Mars energy, and Saturnine energy is more of an opposition. But Saturn and Mars in your chart is stirring things up. They're causing trouble. Why? Because you're not meant to adapt through ease. Nobody does. The reason why some of us are very mental in how we approach the world is because being mental is what saved our lives, because something was pushing against that life, trying to take it, and you had to think your way out of trouble. And the person whom we all call, okay, that person's not courageous, yes, but their family line and their DNA has thrived. Why? Because they ran away when someone else said, no, I'm going to fight. And they're like, nope, screw this, I'm out of here. And they survived, and the person who didn't run didn't survive. You see, so some of the traits we see amongst other human beings are adaptations that allowed them to survive. Okay? And so sextiles and trines do not always offer us the opportunity to build resistance, to build strength. The strength is not necessarily something you have at capacity. It's a tool you can have, but it's something you have to build. It's not something, it comes through dealing with discomfort, and that's how you become stronger. You don't get stronger because you suffered nothing. You get stronger because you've had hard knocks, you've had stress, you've had discomfort. Things didn't go our way, and so we had to develop the capacity for strength. We had to develop the capacity for resilience. Okay, so if the chart never asks you to struggle, you never develop the tools to handle difficulty and to regulate the emotions that come when things don't go our way. And so when stress comes, when difficulty comes, when upset, when discomfort comes, we're unplanned for and caught flat-footed. Okay? So here's an example. We got a client with the Sun trine the Moon. We got Venus trine Jupiter, Mercury sextile Mars. Okay? And so they describe their childhood as easy, their adulthood as charmed. You might recall the story. And then they hit their first Saturn return, and everything just fell apart. Well, here's the thing about that. A Saturn return happens about the age about 28, but it may be a little sooner or a little later depending on the person and depending on their chart. And then everything, so back to the example, after their Saturn return, everything fell apart. And since they'd had a beautiful childhood, followed by a charmed adolescence and young adulthood, they were unprepared when they just right in front of their 30s, end of their 20s, into their 30s, when the rug got pulled out from underneath them, rather unceremoniously and rather ungloriously, and now they're flat on their bum, and they've had no prior experience with things not working out. They don't have any internal resources to cope with. So when Saturn demanded accountability, when Saturn demanded mastery, skill, experience, and turning that into a plan, a strategy to keep us on our feet so that we don't get knocked over by the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, this client was unprepared. It does happen. It does happen. So let's explore this further. So here's what I want to share. Harmonious aspects can promote spiritual bypassing within the chart itself, because everything feels internally coherent. So there's no reason to question, no reason to deepen, no reason to build capacity for the unknown. Now, by the way, when people become rebels, they're responding to trouble. Nobody becomes a rebel because their life was easy. You become a rebel because your life wasn't easy and people are constantly poking at you, that finally one day you lost it and now you got a question. You're like, okay, why is it this way? So when you're a teenager, you start asking that question. It's like, okay, so we believe this. Why do we believe that? Marriage is forever. Why do we believe that? It's not forever. Clearly it's not. But why? And yet for years, marriage is forever. We still believe that to this day. You're supposed to marry someone and stay with them until the cows come home, or the birds, or the sheep, or whomever is going to be coming home. And yet, this clearly isn't working. It's not happening. So why do we still believe it? Or that certain people are allowed to be successful artists and creators and healers and mystics, and bunches of other people are not. So special people are allowed. But unspecial people, i.e. the rest of us, aren't. Really? Who says? Who says? Whose idea was this? Okay? This is what I mean by this. If you don't have any challenges in your life, you can't be a rebel. You can't be an outlaw. You can't be a heretic. See, you hear my voice going? You can't be a heretic. Okay? Heretics are questioning. the doctrine, the orthodoxy. You're like, wait a second, hold on a minute. Why do we believe this? I mean, historically, human beings have done some really interesting things that made sense to them. If you were sick, they bled you. They put leeches on your body and bleed you because they're trying to get the dark, evil energy out of your body. And then somebody must have said at one point, okay, so why are we doing this? I mean, what does this do exactly? Because people don't get bled by leeches in Western medicine currently. As far as I know, no one's being bled, but we did that for centuries, trying to get the dark evil out of everybody's bodies and give it to, leech, I guess. So somebody had to question that because it wasn't making sense, because it was causing more problems than it solved. Or it didn't solve any problems, and someone said, wait a second, people aren't surviving, or wait a second, it's not making people well. Why are we doing this? It's challenge that creates its trouble, and challenge that creates rebels, the outlaws, the heretics, the questioners, the truth seekers. It is a lack of truth that makes people want the truth. It is a lack of control that makes people want agency and autonomy. It is a lack of answers that make people want to ask questions. If you got all the questions answered, there's no need to ask another question. You've got everything you need, okay? So, the thing about hard aspects, because they contrast, these flowing aspects are contrasting with the more hard or challenging aspects. And the thing about that is, with lots of natal squares, people who have them tend to report that these configurations are painful. Yet they taught them how to navigate difficulty, to hold paradox, to persist through challenge. So the square builds the very thing the trine assumes you won't need. And here we are to Mozart, who has a chart filled with squares. And by the way, his life was by no means easy. He had struggle. He had to work very hard to stay in the good graces of the ruling class that he served. And he had money challenges, and as a creator he would have had challenges when it came to, taking care of a family. And he was a bit more creative and playful than his own father was. Now, I did say that he had natal Neptune in Leo in the 12th, and natal MC in Gemini in the 10th. And this aspect could have sat and done nothing for his life, and we'd never know his name or hear anything about him. He made transcendent beauty in music. That's how he communicated. That's how he shared his voice. That's how he shared his point of view. He was a very playful guy, by the way. And so Neptune in Leo is playful, creative. This is how we get a song based on a nursery rhyme. I believe the nursery rhyme was Mary Had a Little Lamb, I think. And he turned that into a gorgeous piece of music. And so, a lot of squares. Now, what I want to point out is that one day, that natal connection between Neptune and MC got woken up. Now, Mozart was about 3, maybe 4, when his father was, tidying up after a lesson, working, and the piano was out. And young Mozart, because he's a curious child, climbs up onto the piano bench and starts banging on the piano. His father sees that and takes it as proof that his son seems to have an interest in music, and he decides to start tutoring young Mozart immediately. His father was Leopold Mozart, who was a very well-respected violinist and composer in the Austrian court, serving the Austrian emperor. And so he was a very well-respected tutor, and many of the wealthy families in Austria, particularly Vienna, were already students of Mozart's father Leopold. And so he tutored both children. And the reason why Mozart is so good is because the person that was teaching him, his own father, was highly exacting, highly disciplined, because he was already teaching so many people, was already an accomplished composer and a musician of his own accord, previous to anyone knowing of his young son Amadeus Mozart. And so this is how he got so disciplined. He started very young, when his mind was more like a sponge and eager to learn and eager to pick things up. his father would have used repetition, 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 repetition. Okay? Now here's another person that's kind of like that. I'm certain everybody has heard of Mariah Carey, who's got a smashing voice, and I think a lot of people attribute to her just a natural talent. And the truth is that Mariah was taught she had a lot of teaching, in fact. And who taught her? Her mother, because her mother was a vocal instructor, and she was also a classical singer, meaning opera singer. And one day, she was doing her vocal room warm-ups and prepping for a performance of her own when she noticed that Mariah was singing along with her, and that Mariah was singing these parts that were very complicated to sing, and she was like maybe 5 years old, maybe 6, and her mother heard that and went, well, that's interesting. I think I need to teach this kid how to sing. So she took on Mariah's tutelage. So when you hear Mariah sing, you do not hear someone who woke up some day, like maybe at the age 11, 12, and just went, woo, and then her voice was amazing. What you hear is what I hear. Someone with tremendous, had natural ability, certainly, but tremendous amounts of discipline and patience, because her mother was a classical musician, meaning a vocalist, and that's rigorous training. In order to sing the way opera singers sing, that's a lot of rigorous training, and she knew music well. And so Mariah practiced from a very young age to be able to sing as she did. It was not magical. She did not wake up one day and open her mouth and just sing beautifully. She had years and years and years of rigorous training underneath the tutelage of her mother, who was an accomplished opera singer. And the reason why I'm telling you this story, Star People, is because I really, 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 really would like to get people out of the notion that one day people wake up and they are just astonishingly talented and don't have to do anything to make anything happen. Now, she has her Venus in the 12th house, and it is sextile her Black Moon Lilith. Now, Black Moon Lilith is in Gemini, and her Venus is in Aries, which is where her Sun is. It's in the latter degrees of Aries. And so I mention this because there's a part of her, that her Black Moon Lilith is in Gemini. And that means being told to be quiet, not to share, not to be so loud, too much, what your voice is too much, and yet that voice is the voice that allowed Mariah to succeed on a level that most people will never ever achieve, but also required all of her childhood, all of her adolescence spent practicing, doing repetition, doing exercises, doing vocal exercises when all the other children would have been out playing. Okay? Same thing for Mozart, right? So here's the takeaway for this particular part that I'm discussing. The square builds the very thing that a trine assumes you do not need. And I'm saying that twice because it bears repeating. Wait, before I go, let me show you, let me see. So, once again, much like Mozart's chart, Mariah has a lot of squares. So she has more squares than she has any other aspect in the chart. The second aspect she has a lot of are sextiles, a lot of potential. And then the third most dominant aspect is a trine, which is the support. So mostly, you'll see, mostly squares. Now, quickly, let's redefine good. Because we're going to make it more mature, more context sensitive, okay? So, let's get rid of that binary. If good aspects can produce fragility, paralysis, and entitlement, and bad aspects can build resilience, depth, and mastery, then the language of good and bad is meaningless, it's useless, let's stop using it. What we need is a language of function, context, and lived experience. So, here's a new framework. Aspects are syntax, they're not morality. Trines equal fluency. Sextiles equal invitation. Squares are frictions that build capacity. Oppositions are dialogues requiring integration. Quincunxes are necessary strangeness that refuses easy resolution. Conjunctions, though technically not an aspect, are unmediated intensity that has no volume, no tone or pause control, and it creates volatility. So here's a radical question. What if the hardest chart is actually the easiest life? Because nothing ever asks you to grow, nothing ever. So what if the easiest chart becomes the hardest life because you're unprepared for the inevitable difficulty that comes for us all? So let's briefly look at some transits. Even an over-harmonious natal chart will eventually meet Saturn, Pluto, Mars, or Uranus via transit. So how you meet these moments depends on what your natal chart taught you. If it only taught you ease, comfort, convenience, the lesson will be brutal. It will be brutal. So let's encourage a little self-inquiry, yes? So let's look at your chart. Where are your trines and your sextiles? Have they been gifts? Have they been sites of complacency or not? Okay, and so the key insight here, outlaw astrology, meaning astrology that we practice, doesn't categorize aspects as good or bad. It asks which each configuration teaches us, what it costs us, what it builds, what it creates, what it needs to thrive, how we grow. It honors the reality that sometimes the kindest thing a chart can do is make us work for it. And let's build some resilience here. Let's work with these aspects consciously. So, ritual 1, the trine audit, and let's let your natal trines look at them and ask, where have we made life too easy? Where have I coasted? Where have I avoided necessary difficulty because I had a natural talent to fall back on? So write down one area where the trine has kept you comfortable but stagnant. Ritual 2, activate your sextiles with intention. So choose one natal sextile and consciously act on it during this week. Don't wait for an opportunity to knock. Open the door yourself. Make the choice. Make the invitation real. See what happens when you engage rather than assume. Spread. So let's do a suggestion here. I'm going to suggest a tarot spread. And harmony, friction, balance spread is what we're going to call it. It has 3 cards. Card 1 is where am I relying too much on ease? Card 2 is what difficulty do I need? So what difficulty do I need to stop avoiding? And card 3 is what resilience? What would resilience look like here? Or what does resilience look like for me? Okay, and so let's do some transit work. Track a harmonious transit. This could be trine or sextile this week, and notice if or next week, and notice if it feels supportive or passive. Did you take action, or did you assume it would work itself out? So use the transit as a mirror to see how you can relate to ease in real time or not. And here is something to think about. Write about a time when something came too easily and you regret not working harder. And this is the trine shadow. Or write about a time when struggle made you better. And this is the squares gift. And so you can notice which story feels more true. Okay, so here we go. Key takeaway here. Good aspects are not always good for you. Trines can breed complacency, sextiles can overwhelm you with options, and an over-harmonious chart can leave you unprepared for the friction that life inevitably brings. The outlaw astrologer refuses to moralize aspects and instead asks, what does this configuration teach? What does it cost? What capacity does it build or deny? Okay? And so this week, choose one easy aspect, a trine or a sextile, and ask it. Ask yourself, where have I been made lazy by this? Where have I been kept safe but small? Let the aspect answer honestly. Write down what you hear. So ask the aspect as if it were a person. Okay, so the next episode we're going to be talking about the next arc, and that is about the hard aspects. And so episode 165 is going to be squares. Are squares really a problem, or are they the engine of everything you've ever built? So we begin Arc 2, the tension paradox. And with that said, thank you very much, star people, for listening and sharing. Remember that we're on Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can find those links in the show notes. There is a newsletter called The Daily Stargazer, and it's by me, Outlaw Astrology. And you can find the links on that and information on that in the show notes as well. Thank you very much. Peace and cognitive rebellion, star people.